In the natural world, all things that die are eventually consumed and recycled, and there are many real-life body snatchers. Small but hungry sexton beetles can smell carrion from hundreds of meters away. This pair have found a bat, which is a perfect home for their young. Although 50 times their weight, they still manage to bury it completely. Underground, mother is always on hand to select the choicest bits of bat and feed her brood mouth to mouth. Some wasps have a more aggressive way of finding infant care. They hijack a living body and lay their eggs in it. This hawk's head caterpillar is now a nursery. Minuscule wasp larvae are happily munching away at its insides, carefully avoiding its vital organs. They burst from its body to transform into wasps, a metamorphosis this caterpillar will never make. Other organisms are dedicated to decay. The amazing slime mold is not one animal, but an alliance of thousands of amoeba-like creatures. They stream together to take on the shape of a slug a few millimeters long that slides across vegetation, feeding on bacteria. But some minuscule diners feed on carrion. Decomposing bodies let off a tantalizing stream of odor that attracts flies like tiny vultures who track the smell to its source. A corpse is a perfect place to lay eggs. Each female lays over 300, covering the body like grains of rice. As soon as the maggots hatch, they begin feeding by scooping in the food with claw-like mouthparts. They can devour a corpse in a week. Competition inside a dead body is intense. When disturbed, cheese skippers display a remarkable escape mechanism. Chrysomia maggots adopt a different strategy. They feed on other maggots. Forensic evidence left by insects has helped police prove cases of murder and sentence the culprits to imprisonment. But humans aren't the only ones to take prisoners. Pea-sized Amazon ants are slave drivers with attitude. They may be miniature, but their main tactic in life is robbery with violence. Advanced scouts target colonies of Formica ants. The defenders are quickly overcome, and large numbers of larvae are captured and carried off into bondage, where they hatch and accept the smell of the new colony as their own. The Amazons are entirely reliant on their slaves for nourishment and survival. This tiny parasitic wasp is stalking a ladybird, but it's not trying to sting it. The reality is much more horrifying. It's trying to place an egg within the living tissues of the ladybird. It probes, and then the egg is laid. When the grub is ready to pupate, it eats its way out of the still living ladybird and spins a cocoon around her feet, anchoring her down. In this way, the pupating wasp gains protection from the ladybird's armor, swapping one life for another. For millions of years, small creatures have been traveling the world to colonize and exploit new areas and establish new breeding colonies. One beetle has learned to get exactly where it wants to by using the wind. As the summer sun warms up, Californian ladybirds have to escape the heat to find cooler spots. They know that far overhead, strong winds blow. If they fly high enough, they can hitch a ride to the Sierra Nevada mountains, 80 kilometers away. They descend onto a few sheltered valleys where they collect in their millions. They spend the summer and winter here, only returning in the spring, when the wind starts to blow the other way. The Greek island of Rhodes is home to the Jersey tiger moth. But although a paradise for humans, the summer sun is like a blast furnace for these diminutive insects. Animals with wings, though, don't have to suffer. They can always move. In the summer months, all the tiger moths on the island head for a few wooded valleys where they find cool shade and water. In Australia, bogong moths smaller than your little finger use the same tactic. It's too hot. They fly hundreds of kilometers to the mountains to hide in cool granite caves, navigating by using the moon and the stars. But they can be fooled. This might look like the sky, but it's not. It's the roof of a cave, and the stars are the tails of glowworms who feed on the unwary navigators. For small creatures, expeditions between habitats are always a gamble. And the longer the journey, the greater the odds against finishing it. In North America, the monarch butterfly migrates some 3,000 kilometers, but the locust holds the distance record. In 1988, a massive swarm of locusts left Africa and flew across the Atlantic Ocean, stopping at the Cape Verde Islands to refuel, where they destroyed trees and crops and then flew on. They were spotted by ships in the mid-Atlantic and then began turning up on the South American coast after a 5,000-kilometer flight. That's the equivalent of a trip to the moon and back for us. Insects find it hard to adjust to recent changes in their world made by humans. Water boatmen's flight instructions haven't been revised in several million years, and they tell them to look for one thing: water. This was fine until humans invented cars and washed and polished them until they reflected polarized light in the same way that water does. But while some fail, others will succeed. But some tiny creatures have learned to exploit man's presence. In 1945, at an Air Force base in New Zealand, 2 queen wasps disembarked from a crate of spare parts that had arrived from Europe. They had found the promised land. With no predators and no harsh winters, their nests grew to several meters across and contained thousands of angry wasps, a nightmare for anyone living near them. It took only one aeroplane flight for insects to claim a new land for their own. In a realm beyond our imagination live millions of tiny creatures. They surround us, yet often go unnoticed. Communication is their key to survival, but we are only just beginning to understand the many languages of this fascinating miniature world. Color camouflage for protection. It's no wonder we don't always spot these tiny leaf insects. But when alarmed, some abandon their disguise to startle and surprise predators. These toxic beetles use color to advertise their deadliness. At night, sound is the most popular way to communicate. In Panama, little frogs, about 4 centimeters long, make big noises. The louder, the sexier. Females tune in to the second half of the male's call, so some males retime their calls to jam their rival's song. If all else fails, they resort to violence. Cicadas may be hard to see, but they can definitely be heard. The males are the loudest of all insects, producing a deafening song that can reach 120 decibels and travel over 1 kilometer. Vibrations do it for some tiny creatures. Toktokee beetles, the size of a chestnut, communicate with each other in a kind of secret Morse code. A similar-sized longhorn beetle rasps out loud warnings using a file on its back. Each species has a different note. Less than 1 centimeter in length, leafhoppers hear with their feet. They drum rapidly on plant stems to announce their presence to the opposite sex. Signaling through vibration is safer than singing out loud. This water strider, dwarfed by a lily pad, uses the pond surface to send messages. Only males create these ripples with their front legs to tell their rivals no trespassing. Honeybees are highly advanced communicators, and scent is just one of their languages. On their return from foraging, they waft a chemical which acts as a homing beacon for those following behind. The queen bee releases chemical signals to let the workers know who's boss. Bees also communicate through dance. This is how they tell the others about their day of foraging, the direction and distance of the flowers, and the quality of the nectar. These nocturnal firefly beetles, only about 1 centimeter long, are bioluminescent. Each species has its own code, and females can identify their ideal partner by the rhythm and number of his flashes. In Malaysia, every night of the year, thousands and thousands of fireflies flash in perfect synchrony to reach the farthest distance possible. The male's display says, "Come here, mate with me." No words are needed in this most fluorescent of worlds. Little creatures rule the world, and the secret of their success lies in their ability to replicate themselves at astonishing rates. Yet in this race to reproduce, many of the animals of the microcosmos have developed amazing tactics to secure a mate and continue their line. Small animals are expert at exploiting increases in food through rapid reproduction. Aphids can clone themselves to take advantage of abundant vegetation. In just one season, a single female can give rise to a population of billions of little pests, much to a gardener's dismay. Anemones replicate themselves by simply dividing in two. This enables them to quickly occupy new vacancies and expand their colony. But those who want to reproduce sexually must first find a mate. Tiny male stingless bees attract a female with a gift of perfume that they gather from the orchids. The male hanging fly indulges his leggy partner with a dinner date. But once mating is finished, he snatches his gift back. Wrestling male antlerflies have to topple their rivals to prove their worth to the fairer sex. Females will only mate the most macho males. Others advertise for a mate with colorful campaigns. Like tiny jewels of the jungle, these jumping spiders choose an ornately patterned partner. Their colorful courtship is backed up by signaling sweet nothings with their palps. Sexual advertisements, however, can be easily confused. Come the mating season, and the male jewel beetle starts lusting after a large, dimpled orange female. But certain beer bottles accidentally epitomize all that the males find attractive in their partners, and leave the females feeling somewhat rejected. Other flashy lovers are attracted by bright lights, but this femme fatale firefly lures males of another species by copying their luminous language of love. Unwitting males are enticed to their death. Some animals like to double date. Snails are hermaphrodites, and they fertilize each other at the same time. After firing chalky love darts into each other, they then mate in a slimy embrace that lasts for hours. Dragonfly reproduction is a competitive business. Males without partners dive-bomb copulating couples in an attempt to split them up. But the course of true love never did run smooth. And for the male Nephila spider, mating is truly a deadly affair. He is absolutely tiny, but the female is a giant. She often mistakes his amorous approach as a call to dine. If he wants to leave alive, he must fertilize her whilst her mind is on other things. Mayfly adults emerge and fly for one day only. They gather in unimaginable numbers to mate on the wing. Their raison d'être is to find a mate and pass on their genes. Once mated, they fall to the water, release their eggs, and then die. In the fight for survival, reproduction is more important than life itself. In a miniature world, there is safety in numbers. Being one of many can turn vulnerable tiny creatures into a skilled and formidable army. These walnut-sized soldier crabs form huge armies to search for food. Being one of many also means that the chances of being eaten by a predator are very slim. Unlike crabs, ants, bees and wasps live together in huge numbers socially all the time. A single ant may be annoying, but a whole army can be an insurmountable force. For every human, there are at least 1 million ants. Army ants, acting like one huge organism, move in relentless marching columns that can take hours to pass. They are protected by 1 centimeter long soldier ants armed with razor-sharp pincers that can easily penetrate human skin. These tiny carnivores feed by cutting up their victims on the spot and carrying the parts back to a temporary nest. These ravenous army will devour anything that is unable to escape quickly enough. Venomous spiders, scorpions, and even snakes. In Brazil, army ants have even been known to eat tethered horses. Once the food supply in one area has been exhausted, the army has to move on to find more. In bee societies, every insect is dedicated to the good of the colony. Like ants and wasps, bees live in all-female societies. This swarm is a sisterhood, united in the service of their queen. With thousands of courtiers, the hive runs like clockwork. Just like human armies, guards stand duty, protecting the hive. If invaded, kamikaze defenders will rush out to meet the attacker, each willing to sacrifice their lives to protect their queen. In the forests of West Africa, there is something to terrify an arachnophobe. A giant spider's web 10 meters high is home to communal hunting spiders that share whatever insect is caught in their web. Although numbering only hundreds, this small garrison is no less deadly. The spiders are a hit squad of highly organized assassins lying in wait for any vibrations that is the spider's dinner gong. Sometimes numbers of ladybirds and flies can reach plague proportions. But it is the locust that holds this record. 5-centimeter-long locusts are the most destructive insects in the world. A small swarm can eat in a single day enough food to last 500 people for a year. In 1875, the world's largest ever swarm of locusts flew over Nebraska. It contained over 12.5 trillion insects and weighed more than 30 million tons, making this the most formidable miniature army of all time.